If you're frustrated trying to build a business in 2026, then this video is for you. Because not only do we need to be good at the business we're actually trying to build, and in my case, translating neuroscience into something people and companies can actually use, but we also need to figure out social media marketing, building a website, creating video content, YouTube analytics, hooks, editing, and all of those very frustrating things that are basically research topics by themselves. And on top of that, we need to deal with the whole emotional side of being an entrepreneur, which can be frustrating, tiring, and there are lots of ups and downs, and it's ego-crushing, and on some days very much soul-crushing. And then again, we feel like we're soaring like an eagle because everything works out. Today I saw this short video from Leila Hormozi where she talked about entrepreneurs needing to be able to tolerate frustration, uncertainty, and unpredictability.
What do you see as the number one thing holding people back from having success in their life?
The number one reason that people cannot grow a business and that they don't succeed is because they cannot manage their own mind. They cannot manage their mind and they cannot manage their emotions. Their inability to manage their emotions during COVID is what ended their business. They couldn't tolerate the feelings of uncertainty. They couldn't tolerate the feelings of frustration. They couldn't tolerate the feelings of unpredictability.
I love that she addresses this topic. And what I very much appreciate about her and her husband's content is that they don't give us motivational BS, but always have solid research behind the things they say. Here in this video, she tells us what we need as entrepreneurs to be successful mentally. But how do we get there? And some people just seem to be more natural in tolerating those negative emotions. And that, of course, can be a personal coping style or a skill, really a skill they've previously learned. And this is not a fixed personality trait. And I strongly disagree with that notion of fixed personality traits because none of them are fixed, especially in the light of more recent research finding on neuroplasticity. So here we will treat them as learned and faithfully practiced behaviors, meaning we treat emotion regulation as a skill that can be trained and a skill that you and I can learn. So let's look at a few practical, evidence-based ways to train this. But first of all, what she actually is telling us in scientific terms is that we need better emotion regulation, right? But what does that even mean? Emotion regulation is defined as the ability to modulate an emotion or set of emotions, and in plain English, that means we can influence the intensity, duration, expression, or direction of an emotional response. Sometimes we do this consciously, for example, by changing how we interpret a situation. And sometimes it happens more automatically without us deliberately monitoring it. So when I talk about emotion regulation here, I don't mean being calm all the time. I mean being able to work with an emotional state enough that it does not completely take over our behavior and decisions. So here are 3 methods I personally use and really like. The first one is the STOP method, which comes from a system called goals management training. So imagine you're overloaded, you're procrastinating, you're checking your email instead of working on the presentation. You're getting grumpy, you look at your YouTube analytics, and suddenly everything feels pointless. The STOP method has 4 steps. Stop, think, organize, plan. Why does this help? Because when we're frustrated or under pressure, we react automatically. We avoid, seek relief, and we do the familiar thing. And STOP gives us a pause before we react from a bad state. STOP means you literally pause. You say it out loudly or in your head, and you stop. You take a step back and pause. Think means you ask yourself, what is actually happening right now? What is really happening around me versus the crisis story my brain keeps telling me? And what is really going on? Organize means you ask, what is the real problem here? And often it's not what we first think. The problem might not be my business is failing. It might be I'm trying to learn 5 different things at once and I'm overloaded. Now, that would be me today. The problem might not be I hate creating content. It might be I'm trying to fit into a content creator drawer when actually I'm a teaching scientist. Plan means you ask, what are the next 1 or 2 or 3 useful small steps, like really small steps, and not the perfect steps or the whole huge big plan. Just the next 2 or 3 useful actions you can take today. In my case, plan the outline for this YouTube video that feels useful for me and is in my voice. And I like this because it brings you back to the goal, to goal-directed action. And there is solid evidence that small goal-directed actions reduce anxiety and depression scores and improve our overall well-being. So it's not just getting out of a bad emotional state, but it genuinely helps your brain to feel better. The second method comes from solution-focused brief therapy. And these are questions I used to ask my patients when I still worked as a therapist. But you can obviously do them by yourself, and I do that. You can do it in your head if you want, but I find writing works much better, and preferably with pen and paper, not a laptop, no typing, because it forces the brain to slow down. And I think that is genuinely helpful because our modern life right now is just too fast-paced for our brains a lot of the times. The first question is the miracle question. Suppose tonight, while you're asleep, a miracle happens and your problem is solved. You, however, don't know that it has been solved for you. And when you wake up in the morning, what are the first small clues, the first small signs that tell you something is different? And small really is the key word. Not my whole business is suddenly successful, but what would you actually notice? And I'll put the questions in the description below. And then there are exception questions. When is the problem less intense? When does it not happen or happen less? What's different in those moments? And these are useful because when we're frustrated, the brain makes everything feel global. This always happens. This never works. And exception questions make you look for moments where it wasn't quite as bad. If there are exceptions, there are clues, then scaling questions. One on a scale from 0 to 10, where are you right now? What makes it that number and not lower? What would move it 1 point lower? I really like measuring emotions because it makes them more tangible. And if it's tangible, I can deal with it. And I used to do that with my patients before every exercise and after, just to find out what works best for them. So do that exercise. This morning, for example, I was really frustrated with building a business. I hate creating content to chase metrics and subscribers and the perfect hook, because that's generally not me. I want to teach the content I care about. So when I ask myself, what would move that frustration 1 point lower? The answer was obvious. Teach what I actually care about. Stop trying to become someone I'm not. Then coping questions. How have you managed to keep going despite this? What are you already doing that helps, even slightly? And these move the brain away from rumination. They make you look for resources rather than for more evidence of the problem. And that's especially useful when frustration makes things feel hopeless, because that's exactly when the brain needs help finding the next concrete step. The third method is the 2-bucket exercise, and I use this in my private client worksheets and also in my own writing exercises. You draw 2 circles. One is not in my control and the other in my control. And I usually start with not in my control because that's the stuff that's driving me nuts in the moment. And yes, nuts is a very serious medical definition for me at times. So, with my frustration around creating content, what's not in my control? So I can't change the way the world is right now. I can't change that there's a lot of AI-generated slop out there. I can't change that some of the videos that perform really well in my niche are fully AI-generated BS. And that can feel really frustrating when you're putting actual work and research into yours. And I can't change that online content is part of building a business right now. And I also cannot change that I'm not 25, blonde, pretty with big boobs. And I also can't control whether my videos do well or not. Getting that out of my head already helps, because otherwise it all sits in my working memory as one big, tangled and very frustrating mess. Then, what is in my control? So I can choose how I approach creating content. Do I chase every metric, or do I teach what I actually want to teach? I can choose not to get angry at the world for being the way it is. I need to accept it, and I can choose not to engage with content that makes me feel bad. Also, I can shape what I see online, and that will be in one of my next videos, my Dachshund puppy diet. I also can make the next video about what I find useful, and I can choose the one small next action. Doing this exercise gives me a sense of control, because that is what I direct my brain towards with this exercise. I really need to do this daily again, because practicing this over time really does help balance things out when everything feels uncertain and unpredictable. And if I watch the evening news, because uncertainty feels worse when the things I can influence and the things I cannot are all mixed together in one big cloud in my head. So when I separate them, I can stop fighting the one side and act on the one here. And that is what I can control, and that gives me a place to stand. So those are 3 methods you and I can use to improve emotion regulation. And this matters whether you run a business or work in a company or trying to start a business, because we all need to tolerate frustration, uncertainty, and unpredictability. And no generic resilience slogan is going to get us there. Just telling yourself, I need to control my emotion, of course doesn't help, because when you're in the middle of the emotion, that's exactly the difficult part. Something happens, it triggers frustration, something doesn't work. You need to do the work you don't like. The world changes and you have no control over a lot of it. But you start looking for what you do have control over. And when you can see that, things feel less hopeless. You find things you can actually do, and that gets you out of the hole. Emotion regulation doesn't mean you become a perfectly calm person who never gets frustrated. It means you get better at noticing your state before you make the decision, before the state makes the decision for you. And then you use a method, a pause, a question, a piece of paper, a next useful action. Thanks for watching this video, and see you soon in the next video.